Golden Spiral Media presents The Blacklist Exposed.
In this world, there are no sides, only players. Welcome to The Blacklist Exposed. I am Agent Troy Heinrichs.
And I'm Agent Hank Davis, sitting in for Agent Peterson. And I'd like to say I'm just here for the baklava. Thanks for joining us as we discuss number 67 on the Blacklist, Ruslan Denisov, which aired February 12, 2015, written by Jonathan Shapiro and Lucas Ryder, and directed by Andrew McCarthy. Show notes and other intel for this episode of the Blacklist Exposed can be found at goldenspiralmedia.com/the blacklist. And we offer you a new episode every Monday.
We asked you last week to answer our profiling question of the week. Does Lizzie have the fulcrum or something else? And Mary said it's not the fulcrum. It might be part of it or possibly a clue. I think when the fulcrum was hidden, it was all in one piece or in one place. This is just part of it. So is the key he got from Pepper, from those natural environmentalists episode in the wind chime earlier this season, is that key and the info he got from Fitch part of that so that they could puzzle it back together? What do you think?
I think that's an excellent idea. Why would you keep it all together? You would have to keep it separated, like the song says, and make it harder for somebody to acquire it.
Absolutely. Brenda said, could it be the recesses of Liz's mind is the fulcrum itself? And Red has the catalyst via the music box to release those memories. The key and St. Petersburg may lead to her mom to validate.
That is a fantastic theory. That's a little off the radar, but I think it could be something like that since they've already introduced the whole mind games and recessed memory stuff in earlier episodes.
And apparently introduced to potentially Liz's mom in that dream sequence with the woman that was shouting at the man at the door last week.
Good point. Debbie said, honestly, if we say yes, bet the answer will be no. And if we say no, we will find out it is yes. I think the writers are writing depending upon what the viewers are saying. I have noticed that whatever seems to be the trend, the writers switch it. They are fantastic.
I could see that happening. We always thought that with Lost, but TV shows are produced well in advance. So I'm sure that this has all been written, but we've been speculating theories since season 1. So I'm sure that they've been looking at it and then trying to throw us off our game.
Val said, I hope it is something else. Troy, do you hope it's something else?
It looks like something else. Aram said it was something else. I mean, people were saying music box. People were saying microchip. I'm curious because even Aram, if Aram's stumped by it, then we're all stumped by it.
Linda said, I love this whole fulcrum thing. By definition, a fulcrum is a pivot point or the thing that plays a central role in a situation. You must have a fulcrum for leverage.
I like it. Very good. Very good.
And Rory said, I wasn't sure when I saw it, but when I looked on the NBC page under clips, it shows that scene with a caption saying, the fulcrum emerges. So it made me think different.
That is a good point. I did look at that on the website, and it does say the fulcrum emerges. So is that really the fulcrum? I think that maybe it should have said the fulcrum emerges ?
Yes.
That's really what's been going on with these writers, right? They say, yep, it is this. Maybe.
Sort of.
Well, great answers. Thanks so much for the feedback. Remember, if you want to answer the profiling question of the week, head on over to our Facebook group. You can just search for The Blacklist Exposed up there in the search bar, or you can find us on Twitter at The Blacklist GSM to get in on the discussion. So this week, our profiling question will be, what will happen to Lizzie now that the harbor master's body was found? We'll get into that and more as we break down this week's episode case profile. This week's case profile, the Anneca Oil Company builds a pipeline through Uzbekistan, although not really maintaining it. This causes soil and water issues now that the company is trying to cover up. And they really are trying to cover it up because things are bad. This prompts a former associate of Red's named Ruslan Denisov to fight for his home country by capturing the company's executive. Rather than report it to the authorities, the company tries to handle it privately. but the executive is not the only person that Ruslan has captured. So the team gets involved thanks to Red, who ends up playing both sides of this game as he partners up with Ruslan himself. Meanwhile, the cops are looking for the harbor master that Tom killed in the boat, and they are asking questions of Liz and the bodyguard, Sam. But in the end, Red always has to benefit somehow. So why don't we start there this week? Agent Hank Davis, thank you for joining us here on the Blacklist Exposed in Aaron's absence. What did you think of the twist at the end with Savion Oil?
I hate to say this, I hate to be that guy, but I was watching the show with my girlfriend, and she blurted out at the very beginning what she thought was happening, and she was correct.
Before Red and those guys were chit-chatting in the dinner sequence there as they're having drinks, and he's talking about his love interests and why he wants to come back for the art show?
That opening sequence, when they talk about what's going on with the oil company, she just blurts out, "Oh, I bet you it's to prop up a new oil company and he'll get paid off." And I said, "Oh my goodness, you just ruined the show for me."
Oh man, that is really astute of her. We got to get her on the podcast maybe.
Yeah, she's really good at this show. She's really good at a lot of television shows that she's into. She will ruin a show for you in a heartbeat. But for me, I did not see it coming.
Did you like it?
I loved the swerve, but it was like you're trading one evil empire for another, almost. You know, maybe they'll do things better, but wasn't the whole objective to get this pipeline shut down, period?
Well, I don't know if the objective was to shut it down, period. I guess it was more to clean up the situation so that people would have a good quality of life at that point. So if you take that a step further, then what are they going to do with this new oil company? Are they going to maintain it just as good, or are they not going to maintain it just as good? That's really the question. Is this really and it goes back to Red, right? Red is this good guy yet bad guy. So in this case, Ruslan's going to profit. He's going to basically be made a king of Uzbekistan pretty much for the billions he's going to bring in. And then from there, are they going to maintain the pipeline? And Ruslan's just going to be as bad as this guy that was flogging himself as he was praying.
That's a good point as well. And also the long game. Now Red has an in, to their future leader if what he predicted comes true.
Right, just like that one scene. And in this episode was very similar to the Dr. James Covington episode, where we have a bad guy who really isn't all that bad because he ends up just wanting to do good just with the wrong purpose and motive in mind. And in James Covington, we had that same situation where we had this port authority in Indonesia, I believe it was, and the guy needed the heart transplant, but because Covington was taken off of the board, Red was able to then control that port. And this is kind of that same thing where because Ruslan was able to get the new Savion oil in place, now Red has that controlling interest in Uzbekistan. Very interesting stuff. What do you think about the CIA and the FBI this week, kind of going toe-to-toe? We talked about how the director of this secret clandestine group is maybe tied to the CIA, has at least influences with the CIA since they had the factory in last week's episode. What are your thoughts about how the CIA and FBI are kind of going back and forth this week?
In this episode, it seemed a little odd how they had them in the same room but not trusting each other at all. And I'm wondering if in real life, I don't know any of the behind-the-scenes operations of the CIA and FBI, but you would think that there would be a little more cooperation. But I loved how Agent Cooper he thought he could trust Mr. Hayworth. I don't know. It seemed a little cliche having them be at odds. And I just wonder if there's a little more camaraderie behind the scenes, especially at the higher levels. Couldn't they be a little more free and open, even though some of these things are classified? I didn't really buy that relationship, I guess.
Well, and the interesting thing here goes back to last week's episode because you had, what was her name? Kate Goodson, right? The person that was working with the director. So if Kate was really the CIA counterpart that was supposed to partner with the task force, and now here we have Hayworth, then was Kate really part of the CIA, or is Kate really working for the clandestine group that the director's in charge of?
And that's what I thought all along, is that she was just working for that clandestine group, that she is just kind of a mole and doing the bidding, that they can't afford to have the blood on their hands metaphorically speaking. So she gets caught. It's kind of like she was one rogue agent.
But she uses the cover of the CIA, so does that maybe bring up this bad blood then that Harold feels towards Hayworth and what the situation is this week?
Yeah, and I think that Agent Cooper's used to just doing things above board. If we learned anything with the Luther episodes, is he has a big soft spot for his agents and putting them in danger. So I think from the onset, he disagreed with how the CIA handled the situation. They just want to send in a team to take care of business. And I think that really struck a chord with him, how detached their agency is from their agents and how attached he is to his agents.
And the fact that they broke their own law about not putting a spy in as a clergyman, which I never knew that was something that was real. Maybe if someone from the FBI or CIA can give us a call here at the podcast, leave some feedback at goldenspiralmedia.com/feedback. I'm curious if that law really does exist, that you can't put a spy in a religious outfit. So the tango scene was quite interesting this week. What did you think of the tango and having this kind of intimate dinner scene once again between Red and Liz?
To me, it made me feel like Red and Liz are not related at all, because the way he was describing what was happening with the dance seems like an uncomfortable situation for a father-daughter or even an uncle-niece. I know that has nothing to do with what he was saying, but to me, it made me feel like the writers are letting you know these two are not related.
That's a really good way to look at it. I mean, the shippers are always wanting more and more of the two of them together. And if we look at it from this perspective, it does seem like a dinner date, kind of like their one back in season 1 that they had early on, where she's in the dress and they're having that nice candid conversation. And it seems like the writers want you to believe that there is no father-daughter or uncle-niece relationship because of the way they're writing it. So I like that you picked up on that observation, because that's exactly what I took away from it, is that they're writing it to make it look weird from a shipping perspective and then bring it back to something else. But I really love the art of negotiation. And, of course, that'll be one of our Red's rhetorics that we'll play later on in the episode. What do you think about the art of negotiation? Do you think this was a great way to describe how to negotiate?
I thought they took a little bit of a risk using it in that fashion, trying to use this scene as a way to describe negotiation, but it was well done and it really fit. It fit the whole scenario.
I really love the juxtaposition of the raid going on at the same time and the words he was saying as those shots and the scenes were actually coming up on the screen. How did you think that played out?
Excellent. Whoever produces and really puts these episodes together, they have a exquisite eye for detail and tying in all the factors of the episode in the relationships is what I noticed the most. Just the chaos in Red's life kind of plays out throughout every episode, actually, with whatever's going on for that mission, for that episode. This scene was like chaotic, but he's having a calm dinner. And it's that weird parallel that is his life all the time.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think of it that way either, where you're saying his good side and his bad side are almost at war with each other, and he's actually showing that good side and bad side through these stories that he actually tells.
Definitely.
Very astute. Look at Hank Davis coming onto the podcast and throwing down the knowledge. Love it. Jabin. What do you think of this guy? He basically sold out his country. Now he's basically punishing himself with a little flogging going on. And then he wants to kind of cover it up. And that's why the CIA is there in the first place, right? They're protecting Jabin or hiding Jabin to make sure nothing comes out at the end of the day. And then, of course, Red finds him.
A little cliche of a character. The guy that's done so much wrong that he is punishing himself and going to confession. So I kind of didn't really like the cliche nature of the character, but it was an interesting character.
I really like the fact that they actually went to confession and then there's Red behind the screen. It's like, why won't you show me your face, Father? Why does God hide himself from me?
Why is he unprotected there, though?
The Jabin specifically?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because the preacher, right? Because that's why he's coming to and this is the one thing that I picked up on why he needed to capture the priest, because Jabin is coming to the priest and confessing, but the priest is the CIA agent. So now that the CIA agent is gone, then he's unprotected now because the CIA asset is out of the play.
Okay, I thought they would have just a separate detail monitoring him at all times.
Well, it seemed like they only had one asset from the CIA in town, and then they only had the company asset in town because their company executive went missing. So I think normally, before this episode starts, you only have the preacher is the only kind of outside influencer keeping an eye on Jabin, would be my take.
Okay.
But then they have this kind of interrogation scene where he's dunking him in the baptismal font. Is that sacrilegious? Is that awesome? How do you take that dunking scene in the baptismal font?
All of the above. It was sacrilegious because if anybody takes their religion seriously, that is sacred. And I'm wondering how many people were put off by that. But for me at home and not partaking in something like that, I thought it was hilarious that you are going to be basically tortured in a religious facility. So pretty well done on their part.
I was waiting because he was such a bad guy. If they stuck his face in there, would his face burn from the holy water? And then we move on because Jabin, of course, being a guy who has this information and was told never to reveal it, you always keep leverage, which goes back to the fulcrum, if you will. But you always keep leverage to make sure that you can get out of any situation. And, of course, he has all of the documentation from what all went down, and they use that in this negotiation scene with the company. And Red basically says, vacate your company or we'll go public with what actually happened. How do you think of that interrogation scene and how it went down?
I didn't buy it. If he has all that documentation, how come the CIA doesn't already know or have that under control once they have figured out this situation in its totality? It seems like an easy way to eliminate the information would be to eliminate him and everything that goes along with him.
You're saying, why didn't the company just take out Jabin a long time ago? Why let him live and continue on?
Yeah, it seems like a simple fix. Why wouldn't they just take him down? Or who knows, this might run deeper than we think.
That's a good possibility that it could go deeper. I mean, a lot of places, right, when you do the exchange of a prisoner, you're like, okay, here, let's switch prisoners, and I got my money, and then boom, I just shoot all of you, and I take the money and run. In this case, it's the reverse, right, where he handed him the money, and he should basically keep quiet because he's got the money. So they have no reason to execute him, I guess. And so that's why they let him live. But I don't know, if I was a company and I was doing all this stuff, I'd probably take out anybody that could spoil it for me.
They allude to having mass grave sites. What would one more body be? It just seemed like a simple fix to me.
Yeah, they could cover it up with the actual that he got benzene poisoning himself, and that was that, right?
Yeah, some kind of ironic death.
I love the shock look on Liz's face as this is all going down. Like, why didn't you just share this information with me? Why did you have to keep me in the dark this whole time?
But that's what he does best, isn't it?
Absolutely. The Harbor Master, Sam and the cop. What do you think about bringing this storyline back up? Does this signify that Tom is going to be coming back into the picture sooner than we think?
Yes, this is an excellent way to get Tom back on the scene. And can I throw out a crazy theory? Here's something I thought of when I watched the episode the second time. Red always tries to keep Lizzie in a state of her needing his assistance, correct?
Correct.
So why now? I asked myself, why is this coming on this episode? This is hot on the heels of Lizzie being personally done with Red Reddington and wanting to keep it just business-wise. This situation says, I need some help. It has it written all over it. And if he orchestrated it somehow, them finding the body, that would lead her to say, you know what? I need your help on this one. This is too big for me. The FBI is not going to lie for her or anything. So it kind of puts the control back into his hands, favor for a favor.
I totally buy that. So the question then becomes, if Red does have a hand in the Harbor Master's body being found, is Red working with the cops or is Red working with Sam the bodyguard?
In my opinion, I think Red is working with a cop not necessarily the cops overall. But I think he's manipulating the situation from the background just like he does with everything else.
So you think he's manipulating the main guy in charge?
Yep.
Okay.
Because most of us wouldn't suspect it.
See, and I would say he's manipulating Sam because Sam at least knew of Tom. And since Tom and Red had this secret relationship apparently at the end of the fall finale, then maybe Sam is the one that's saying, hey, let's tip the hat here. And then Red will have to come in to save the day, or Cooper will come in and say, well, that's not our guy, and get covered up by the government agency because FBI is superior to the local enforcement. But I like your idea, though, that Red is manipulating the situation to get Liz back into his good graces.
And it would take something of this magnitude to make that happen.
Absolutely, since she's really done with him because of being used this whole time for the bunny. Well, then Aram does actually analyze the music box / microchip / whatever the heck we think it is, and he says that it's a beta recording device, but even Aram is stumped at how to decode it or listen to it or what have you. So what do you think? And is someone going to be able to crack this code before the end of season 2, or is this going to be a long-running storyline?
I'm wondering if they're going to introduce a blacklister that is going to be able to piece this portion together for us. Some particular person that Red's going to want to get his hands on. That's where I think they're setting this up for. But other than that, it was really awesome to see Aram stumped by something based on technology. You would think that he would have, he has extensive knowledge, so you would think he would have some insight on what to use, how it's used, what it's used for. But to see him stumped like that was pretty funny to me because he's such a technical, analytical guy. So I think they're going to show us a blacklister down the road that Red's going to need to get this thing working the way it's supposed to.
Which is clearly evident when he says, hey, this is beyond my skills. There are people more qualified than me to handle this. That's a clear indicator that somebody should be coming down the line somewhere to help decode this sucker.
Is it believable to you that they have a device like this that is from the late 80s, early 90s, rough estimate, but is stumping somebody who's up to date on technology?
Yeah, it's the part that's a little bit of a stretch. Aaron and I talked about that last week about, tech from the 80s. Is this tech that could actually have existed back then? And, like we said, it could be. Government can make all kinds of stuff that we don't know about, right? Like the B-52 bomber and, they're flying UFOs over New Mexico, but it's really just stealth aircraft that looks different that nobody's seen before. So I think that it's plausible, but we'll have to wait and see what actually comes out of whatever it is to find out if it's something that makes sense to be in the 80s or not be in the... And it was really more like 1990s. So you figure we got internet at this point. Windows, 2 is out at this point. So it's possible, I guess. They made the Macintosh in 84. So that's a really condensed computer in one container. So could you make it smaller? Possibly.
I knew you'd bring this back around to Apple.
Well, let's talk about the characters this week. Unfortunately, Samar was kind of a non-factor. A little disappointed in that. But Aram, continuing on with him a little bit here, someone mentioned to me earlier this week, tying into our Alias concepts with this show with John Eisendrath, Aram is really the comedic relief. And if you go back to Alias, it was like Weiss. Weiss, that character, was kind of the comedic relief for everything that was going on in Sydney's life, in the command center's life. And then here we have Aram, and I love his line this week of, I think I left my soup in the microwave, because he's just so scared of Reddington.
And I love him because he's so intelligent, but awkward at all times.
Do you think that comes from the intelligence factor, that he's awkward, just doesn't have that personable skills?
I think it's a cliche that whoever's the smart guy is got to be a little awkward and quirky. And kind of a cliche, but he fits the character well. He makes that character work.
All right, so then we had a little bit more Wrestler this week. Finally partnered back up with Liz again, feeling a little bit more confident. So apparently we've completely dropped the pill-popping story, and Wrestler seems to be back to his good old self. Now, what do you think of Wrestler's entanglements with Liz this week?
Don't confess whatever you're about to confess to. But Wrestler, he is back to a straight-laced. When the show first started, I used to just think of him as Mr. Straight-Lace until they introduced the pill popping. And now it just seems like he is back to his Mr. Straight-Lace kind of attitude on the show. And he really didn't impact the episode at all to me.
But what I did love about it, though, is that he's having these dialogues with Liz because Liz is in trouble with this harbor master. And remember that he did know about Tom, helped her release Tom into the wild at the end of the fall finale there. And because of that, she now needs to go back. So I love that they're bringing the two of them back together to have kind of this, I trust you, you trust me, let's keep it inside the family moment like we saw at the start of season 2. So I love that they're going back there. So I'm interested to see how that plays out.
And Red had that line when they were in that, the little dining area, and he said something to the effect of, "Oh, I'm impressed. Not with you, but whatever it was." And that was almost like a fatherly or uncle talking to a niece's boyfriend or a daughter's boyfriend. It was almost that kind of feel I got.
Yeah, like I don't give you my blessing, so stick the heck away.
Yeah.
Dembe, yeah, he just kind of showed up to kind of do some muscle this week, but I have to say something about that hat. I mean, when you first saw him come across the screen, it really looked more like a hood, did it not?
It did. He looked like the little airplane fighters from years gone by.
Oh, yeah, totally, yeah, from like the World War II days.
Yes.
I actually thought that the hood kind of made it look like he was a Jedi, so now I really want to see him in Star Wars 7. Comic relief, even without saying anything. Dembe is the best.
And the way they shot him on this episode, he literally was a background character. I don't know if you picked up on some of the scenes where they had him over someone's shoulder in the backdrop and focused in or out of focus slightly at some times. And it was kind of funny to me because I was like, he is a background character, literally.
Even though he had such a prominent role in his episode earlier this season.
Yeah.
Cooper, nice to see him actually being a little bit more firm this week, considering that he caved so easily giving up the code last week.
He's too naive. I mean, he wields all this power. He has all these people's lives in his hands, but he's so naive that he's just spilling the beans on the location inadvertently. I thought that was poorly written for his character. Unless they want us to think he's inept.
And that might be what it is, right? Because he gives up the code last week. He gives up the location kind of nonchalantly this week, even though Red is like literally cursing him out. He's like, how could you give up this information to the one person I told you not to give up the information to? And then he's like, I'll take care of it. Sorry, Dad. But then he does kind of come around, right? He kind of has this storm the castle moment at the end of the episode where he's like, either you shut this down now or we expose your entire operation. So he can be heavy-handed when he wants to, but at the same time, I think that he's really got a soft spot, and that makes him vulnerable.
And I hate to say it, they need to do more of the heavy-handed, even if it's his own people, because that's more realistic, in my opinion.
Then we have this commander. I like to call him Commander Cushion when it came up on the closed captioning. Commander Kushan. What do you think about the way the CIA uses Commander Kushan to raid the castle or the compound and just his overall demeanor in this episode and how he treats Liz and Wrestler? Do you think he was treating him that way because he was already in with the CIA, or do you think he was just being a good Uzbekistanian?
No, I don't think he was being a good Uzbekistanian. I thought from the moment they showed him and presented his character that he was in league with the CIA and that he was just their puppet. We're going to manipulate. Just like in most shows that have they'll have an asset on the ground that's a general or in the military or whatever, and they can just move him around, make him lose his own people instead of losing their people, maybe to have some deniability or whatnot. But I thought he got manipulated by them too easily, and it was standard fare for those types of clandestine organizations working with somebody within the military.
He seemed very confident, though, and very proud. So do you think this makes his character a little strange because he's so easily bent by the CIA when he seems to be so forceful and so proud of his country?
I think he was just using that as a ruse and an excuse for Keen and Wrestler, that he's, this is my investigation, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, he was just trying to keep them back and in the dark while he was being led around by the CIA.
So big burly dog, but on a short leash.
Very short leash.
All right. Ruslan, our blacklister this week. What did you think of him overall?
I got that sense of, I know the political landscape right now, but when they captured the CIA asset Burke and they had the knife to his throat and the way he was just indiscriminately killing people throughout the episode, I thought that it had almost like a terrorist ISIS type feel for me. I don't know if they were trying to tap into that or something, but I had a hard time siding with his cause because the cause of getting rid of the oil or getting it repaired properly was noble, but the way he just took human life throughout the episode, I really had a hard time buying him as somebody that is just going to stand up for this village or something without money being involved.
But did Ruslan actually kill anybody? Because he had all the hostages, and yeah, maybe he was torturing that one executive, dunking him in the pool of water with the benzene in it and letting it eat away at his skin. But I didn't think he actually shot anybody from the people he was capturing. The only people he shot was Commander Kushan's guard member, where he was getting retribution for his people dying.
Okay, I thought earlier that he had somebody taken out of one of those cages, and either he shot him or he had one of his guys shoot him like just in cold blood, just boom, dead. I will have to watch the episode a third time.
Yeah, because I was confused by the elevator transition scene. I thought that was really clever this week, how they used the elevator once and didn't know it was going to happen, and then they say, oh, no, we have no problem getting out of here, and they go back to the elevator a second time. So it must have been pre-planned, I guess, to get back in touch with them, to go to the elevator and we'll come pick you up. And
one of the things that they mentioned in this episode that ties into that is they were being guarded, and then the guards had been doubled, so we can't get out of here. But they seemed to be able to move about and do what they needed to do pretty easily.
So at the end of the episode, then, Commander Kushan's in the box. What do you think Ruslan does to him? Does Ruslan kill him? Does Ruslan say, hey, you're working for me now, the CIA is not here? Do you think Ruslan has a nice change of heart for him, or does he get his retribution, or is he thinking about his end game?
I think he's going to have the people get their retribution. If they would have shown a little bit more, I think I would be more confident with my guess that he was going to let the people in that village pretty much destroy this man. But they didn't show a lot, so it could be what you're saying. He could have finally seen the light on the end game and having a longer strategy than what he has up until meeting Red in this scenario.
And it almost seems like Red's testing him at that point, because Red could have killed Kushan and delivered him in a box dead, but instead he delivers him in the box alive. And I really like how they kind of left that open to make you wonder, did Ruslan finally understand an endgame is more important than immediate retribution?
Yeah, that makes more sense than what I was initially thinking. I was thinking, maybe some of the villagers will get to torture him and punish him for what he's done, but I think you're right.
Well, that could still happen, right? But that could be Ruslan doing his end game of being a leader and then, setting up some kind of democracy vote to say, what do we do about this guy who let this happen to all of you?
Yeah, that'd be good. And that would help propel his leadership skills that Red sees in him.
Yeah, literally, at this point, Red has an in now with this oil company, with Savion Oil, but he also has a friend he's now basically given an entire country to. So he really has a lot of chess pieces in play for Uzbekistan, which when you go back to everything that's happened with this bombing in Russia, the fact that Liz's name is Masha, not Marsha like we said last week, but Masha, which is a Russian derivative of Maria, then maybe he needs to have kind of a chess piece on the board in the old Soviet Republic so that he can be close to Russia when the end game comes down.
I think that is an excellent idea. Not just the oil company coming in that he is already in league with, but having a major, hopefully future political person in play. I mean, that's all he could ask for.
Keen this week. First we had Wiggate. Now we have Hatgate, apparently. People were up in arms about Liz's hat when she was outside in Uzbekistan. What did you think of the hat? Or more importantly, what did you think of Keen overall this week?
I absolutely loved the hat. I'm a sucker for the hat. But overall, her character seems to ride the highs when she's doing well and then bounce to those deep lows. So as she was getting the information about why are they looking into the, the murder or the missing harbor, what was he, missing port authority, Eugene Ames, you could see that just take the wind right out of her when she was already kind of defeated by Red, because Red manipulates her life in every single episode, it feels like. And the way she was just like, you've seen her kind of picking up steam for this good cause of getting rid of this oil company, this pipeline. And then she gets this information. It just took her down the drain, and you could see her wheels spinning and almost that realization of, I'm going to try and get out of this, but I'm going to need Red Reddington, because she always needs Red Reddington. And I thought she did a good job of conveying a fictitiously confident, but always needy Lizzie, and that's what they've shown us throughout this whole series.
Like a daughter needs a daddy.
Like, I need some major help, like a daughter in college needs tuition.
That's a good way to look at it. I thought overall she did good. For some reason this week, I don't know if it was the way they did her makeup or did her hair in that opening sequence with Aram and Red when they're talking about Ruslan initially. Something about it just made her look a little ghostly, like she was afraid or sick or something just because she had to be in Red's presence. But it didn't come off quite as strong. Like last week with the dream sequence, right? Very strong acting, very well done. This week just kind of seemed like she was kind of pushed around a lot. And then because of that, she wasn't very forceful in what she did until the very end when she's like, hot damn, this guy screwed me over again. And then she storms in. It's like, this was all you just trying to get this other oil company in here.
And at this point, why is she surprised? To me, it just seems like it plays over and over and over again. And it's getting harder and harder to understand why she's so shocked at what he'll do to make a situation go the way he wants it to go. I've seen a lot of naivety today, on this episode.
Yeah, I mean, it would almost be like at this point, when that newscast happens on the television, she should almost just kind of sit there and just kind of shake her head, smile, and raise a glass and toast him. Like, hey, you got me again. Good job.
Because he does time after time after time. I think they were trying to convey that she was not, like she was distant. And obviously with that situation going on back in the States, you wouldn't be totally engaged in what's going on. And you would be kind of, absent, even though she was right in the midst of everything. I thought they did a good job of portraying that.
So then Reddington this week, overall, do you like the fact that he's playing both sides? I mean, literally, it's interesting when you think about it, because here he's playing both sides between Ruslan and the task force, but then at the same time, he's playing both sides between the two oil companies. So you have this kind of misdirection, deception in multiple layers through this course of this episode. I found it fascinating the way he was able to move the chess pieces, if you will.
I did as well. And figuratively and literally playing both sides and the middle. And I totally expected him to represent Ruslan in this situation because he made the trip all the way over there. That was my indicator that, he's going to be negotiating with this guy. And when he came out, it was no shock that he was going to be working with Ruslan. But Red being Red, this was like top of the game, Red Reddington. And this is the way his life is. It's chaotic. He's playing both ends in the middle at all times because he says there are no sides, only players.
That's totally true, right? It's only players.
Yeah. And his character just represents that over and over and over again. I mean, we've seen him in countless situations where he knows the Blacklister. He, has either had a friendship with him or has a friendship with him. And, this episode was just a small sampling of his overall chaotic life.
So here's what I'm feeling at the end of the episode. I want to say that this was probably one of the better episodes of season 2 because it seemed more like a season 1 episode where you had that kind of standalone case of the week, twist at the end, everybody was blindsided. And at the same time, I want to say this doesn't advance the overall story at all. So it's also like the worst episode of season 2 because other than just showing the fulcrum or whatever it is at the beginning and end of the episode, this whole case this week doesn't seem like it fits into the overall mythology unless, like I said, he's trying to get some kind of leverage to be close to Russia for some kind of endgame overall, which if you think about how he's explaining to Ruslan about having an endgame, then I think that's why this has to tie into the story somehow, is that this is part of Red's endgame. We just don't know what it is yet.
Yeah, I was trying to piece it together while I was watching the episode. I watched it twice. I was trying to understand how would this play into later events, and I really don't understand, how it's going to advance the story or help him in any way that's going to be pivotal to the fulcrum and all that. But it was almost I wanted to say almost like a feel-good story about, look, this oil pipeline is causing all these problems with the village. And it was almost like a redeeming kind of case, if that's possible. And then at the end, when they whip off your blinders and say, nope, he's just selfish as he always is.
Now, when he came out to do the representation with Ruslan, did you think for a minute, because they just showed you the Harbor Master stuff, that it was going to be Tom? Or did you think it was going to be Red all along?
No, I knew it was going to be Red. I was pretty sure we weren't going to see Tom unless we were going to see him at like the very end showing up in town back in the States. I was confident that it was going to be Red Reddington, especially the way the guy, guaranteed once the guy started hyping up who he had.
And maybe my Tom sensors were on high alert, because the first time I watched it, I did think Tom, and my wife said Red, and I was like, dang it, you're right. The women are 2 for 2 against us. The thing that I wanted to point out here, though, was the really interesting dialect that I didn't pick up until the second watch, where Ruslan is literally repeating the conversation from the night before at the bar with Wrestler, and then they actually shoot over to Wrestler, and Wrestler's like shaking his head like, oh, crap, man. He's like feeding it back to me. Red's coming out the door.
Yeah, they're really good at tying their episode portions together. That'll do it for this week's analysis. Stick with us, though, because Special Agent Intel is coming up in a bit. But we'll be back with Red's Rhetoric right after this.
February, the month of love, and we love all of the great people that are part of the GSM listening family. We especially love our patrons, like Jeff, who shares with us why he listens to Golden Spiral Media.
Basically, the content. I had been listening to Triplecast for a while, but once Aero Squad came over, I started looking at the podcasts that were there and seeing the shows that they were podcasting about and the people that they had hosting that I already had relationships with just drew me over, because I knew it was going to be quality content, and I knew that the people that were hosting were enthusiastic about it.
Do you love our show? Then head over to goldenspiralmedia.com/Patreon. That's Patreon, goldenspiralmedia.com/Patreon to meet Jeff, as well as our other supporters. That's goldenspiralmedia.com/Patreon. Thank you for your support. Welcome back to Red's Rhetoric, that part of the show where we listen in on Red's words of wisdom. Was there any doubt that Red Mouth wasn't going to be the 100% winner last week? That line is still sitting in my head, and I just chuckle every time I hear it. Well, guess what? This week's Storytime with Red, you get to vote which you think is the best, once again, by going over to the Facebook group. Just search for The Blacklist Exposed on Facebook, or give us a tweet at The Blacklist GSM. Our first clip this week comes as the dance floor ignites with a tango.
Watch closely, Lizzie. Everything you need to know about negotiation is there in the Tango Milonga. At the outset, their opponents each had something the other wants. They size one another up, assessing risk, setting boundaries, challenging each other to reach them. A sensuous battle violence and sex, balanced on the blade of a knife. Nothing given that is not earned. Nothing taken that is not given. This is the pure essence of negotiation. Not a poker game, but a milonga. A tango.
Our second clip this week talks about how sacrificing your bishop is always a good long-term strategy.
Sacrifice the bishop. Reykjavik, 72. God, I can remember it like it was yesterday. I was in Stephen Bash's rec room down in the basement eating a fried egg and bologna sandwich when he did it.
Did what? Who did?
Bobby Fischer. It was game 13, move 50. Rook takes bishop d5. He sacrificed his bishop. That's when Russia lost the Cold War. It was staggering. Spassky had no answer because he had no endgame, and neither do you. When you capture and kill a CEO, you incur the wrath of a company. When you capture and kill a CIA agent, you incur the wrath of the U.S. government. That's boots on the ground, drones overhead. What will be your answer to that?
Which was your favorite line from Red this week? You remember, post to our group or tweet us at the Blacklist GSM with the hashtag RedTango if you liked the Art of Negotiation School, or tweet Red Chess if you always keep your endgame in mind.
Now our favorite part of the show, all the theories from our special agents. Our first piece of intel this week comes from Doc H, where he says, I think this is the best episode of Season 2 so far. It was well-paced, great cadence, great case of the week. Plus, we got a good, tight, recent, keen backstory with the data storage device and the harbor master. The best part was that the Blacklist targeted Ruslan not for elimination, but for promotion. Red upscaled Ruslan into a nation builder. I have to say, if you want Reddington to take a side, it is nice when he chooses yours. The dialogue was clean and concise, and we still got the twisty, what the what ending. Cheers, and that's Doc H. Anagram for Ruslan Denisov. Unravel sod sin, a la the contamination issue with the pipeline.
Oh, that's a really nice anagram. I didn't even think of it that way, but that's really clever.
That's extremely clever. I wouldn't even thought to put that in and have it unraveled like that.
Do you think that was intentional?
It has to be. If somebody pulled it out like that, it has to be. Rory posted on Facebook, I'm glad they brought the Harbor Master scenario back, but it made me question if Mr. Kaplan was involved. I thought that with Red being there at the end of that episode, he had the body disappear. I wondered how that guy knew where the body was, and Lizzie better tell Red, not just Wrestler, about this, because Wrestler is only good at getting his butt kicked or captured.
That's 100% correct, Rory. Wrestler's just a giant human punching bag. This kind of goes into what you were saying, Hank, with the fact that Red might be manipulating the situation. So is it very possible that Mr. Kaplan moved that body? Usually Mr. Kaplan does a better job at hiding it, and why would Sam know where it is? So that kind of makes me poke a hole in this theory, but I like the fact that, you know, Red was there at the end, and because of that, there could be some manipulation at play.
I agree.
Well, Dinah on Facebook said, I wasn't super impressed last night. Too much Lizington for me. Not that this is a bad thing by any means. It just doesn't scratch my itch. And like we were saying, it even makes that even clearer when they're having this kind of sensual dinner, but they're trying to showcase it as not being a sensual dinner. And that really brings that Lizington shipping part of it forward. But more importantly, when Wrestler actually then starts kind of poking fun at it too, when he's like, oh, are you guys in a lover's quarrel? You must be in the doghouse, Red. What do you think about the shippers and the Lizington aspect of the episode?
I think the only thing that makes it creepy to me is that there is this mystery on whether Red is Lizzie's father. And if they don't introduce that off the bat, then some of this shipping stuff is fine. But to still have that cloud and then try to ship is disconcerting to me, to say the least.
Makes it a little creepy looking, doesn't it?
Yes, I don't even want to go down that path.
Well, then Val said, I loved this episode. That was so Red. Great words, fighting for an interesting reason, beating the CIA, making fun of the FBI, being close to the ex-USSR, and his Vive la France just made me fall off my bed.
Yes. Red with the words, he is a master. I mean, James Spader portrays this character in a way that I don't think any other actor that I could come up with could pull it off. And it's not just what he says, it's that everything he says means something. Maybe only to him, because he's kind of selfish, but he's just a master at delivery. And for a counterpoint, Tracy says, I love that there are a lot of side stories. They are like little tributaries that will lead to a huge river of information at some point. But MB says, too many side stories. Which is it, Troy?
This is a really great point, because I think a lot of people I've seen either really, really love this episode because it had that season 1 flair, and then a lot of people hate this episode. And this is exactly why people are saying, I'm still into the Blacklist, or no, I'm not really into the Blacklist anymore. And I like the side stories. Yeah, I really like the way she explained it. Tributaries that will lead to a huge river of information at some point, because a show that comes to mind is Veronica Mars, where they had kind of this A story for the whole season. They had a B story for each of the winter finale, spring finale, and then they had the C story, which was the kind of case of the week stuff. And as long as they could keep on that, I'm okay with the multiple storylines. I know it's a little hard to keep it straight sometimes, but that's why we have us. That's why we have NBC.com and Behind the Blacklist. So, yeah, stick with it, because I like the stories. It really makes it feel like there's something larger at play, and that's what keeps me coming back week to week.
And I don't think any television show can drive the story every single week. I think they all do this. They all have these departure episodes that may or may not build characters and definitely don't advance the story, but are still fun to watch. In my opinion, I had a lot of fun watching this one.
Yeah, there's always those episodes midway through the year, especially probably about this time, where there's, junior writers or up-and-coming writers that are part of the show, where they give them a chance to kind of write their kind of one-off episode. Maybe this was that episode, but there was just so much goodness in this episode that I don't know if that was the case for this week. Well, then surprisingly, even though he's on a special covert mission somewhere in the Pacific, our agent Aaron Peterson himself was able to watch the episode, and he sent in a bit of feedback of his own.
Hey, Troy. This is Aaron Peterson with Blacklist Exposed, taking my much-needed sabbatical. But I did want to call in because I did see the episode. Wow, that was one of the better ones. I really love that they brought back the deceased harbor master. Very curious if that's going to play into everything. Some interesting little throwbacks to previous episodes. I'm sure you guys are going to talk about it, so I won't go into it. Looking forward to listening to the podcast and seeing how awesome it is when I'm not around. Probably just got myself out of a job. Anyway, love the podcast. Probably one of my favorite ones, and look forward to hearing what you guys thought. Also, love the way that Red played this one. I thought that the fact that they had basically a villain who wasn't nearly as villainous as we expected. It was nice to have someone who was kind of seen as a torturer of people who ends up doing it for all the right reasons, if that can be such a thing. War is fickle, and that guy, I like what he's doing. So it's interesting stuff. Looking forward to what happens with the show, and looking forward to the podcast. Thanks again. Bye.
Agent Aaron Peterson coming in from the Pacific. What do you think of his thoughts there? Do you like Ruslan at the end of the day? Was this a good Blacklister for you, Mr. Hank Davis?
I didn't. I couldn't get behind him. I said it earlier, and I'll say it again. I just couldn't get behind him because of some of the tactics he was using. It elicited the response of seeing some of those ISIS videos to me, like the way they were, the way he had the guys catch Agent Burke when he's in the priest outfit and have the knife to his neck and stuff. It turned me off to his character immediately, and then I started to question more and more what were his real motives. If Red has a real motive that's even longer down the road, does Ruslan? I don't know.
And I think the only thing that bothered me about it was how high of a number he got, because he was 67, right? So shouldn't this guy be more like a 150 or something, way down on the bottom? It seemed like he was big enough to warrant such a high number on the list, in my opinion.
No.
But I like the story overall. I thought it was a great episode, and I think we'll see Uzbekistan come into play somewhere in season 7 or 8.
And Aaron, you're definitely not out of a job.
All right, well, that'll do it for Special Agent Intel this week. We did get a new iTunes review. A quick thank you to listener Raul this week for leaving us a 5-star review in iTunes. He said, I have a general rule that I let a serialized style show like The Blacklist run for a full season and then get renewed before I invest my time in it. That does mean I do have to play some catch-up, and one of the best ways to do that is through a podcast. That's what Troy and Aaron have here, and I give a listen to their summary episode for Season 1, and it both got me caught up, and I am convinced that The Blacklist is a must-watch show. If you can only listen to one Blacklist podcast, this is the one. Thank you so much, Raul, for that feedback. We absolutely love it. Aaron and I really love doing the show for you to enhance your overall Blacklist experience. So if you would love to tell us how you feel about the podcast, head on over to goldenspiralmedia.com/iTunes, and you can leave your iTunes review of your own, just like Raul did.
Well, that will conclude this episode. Be sure to follow us on Twitter this season at The Blacklist GSM, live tweeting during the East Coast feed, and we will use the show's hashtag, The Blacklist. We also have a Facebook group. Just search for The Blacklist Exposed and join us for the fun. Also, the website will have the episode intel and analysis, as well as links to subscribe to the feed in iTunes and Stitcher. That way you don't miss an episode. Visit goldenspiralmedia.com/The Blacklist.
And intel is exactly what we want from all of you. You can do that in a few ways. First, you can call us at +1 304 837 2278. That's +1 304 837 2278. Special agents are standing by to take your call. But if the phone is not your thing, you can go ahead and send in your voice or other feedback by visiting goldenspiralmedia.com/feedback. If you want to record an MP3, just use the send voicemail button right there on the page.
As you leave your feedback, be sure to mention The Blacklist Exposed, and a big thank you for listening. This week, don't forget to answer our profiling question of the week. What will happen to Lizzie now that the harbor master's body was found?
Until next time, I am Agent Troy Heinrichs. That's at Troy Heinrichs on Twitter. And if you are a fan of Resurrection on ABC or Under the Dome on CBS, check out my other shows at the website noodle.mx.
And I'm Agent Hank Davis, and you can find me talking about all kinds of stuff over at tpenetwork.com and on Twitter at tpenetwork. Be sure to subscribe to the show so you don't miss an episode. Submit your feedback or theory via the website, but most importantly, keep yourself off
The Blacklist. The Blacklist Exposed is a Golden Spiral Media production, copyright 2015. Find more of our great podcasts at goldenspiralmedia.com/podcasts.